Hello.
Hello.
Say, do you have an old fart in your family that thinks the M1 Carbine sucks major ass?
Yeah, I
You
mean,
do?
oh,
Well, don't we all?
yeah.
Would you like to hear their real-life experience invalidated?
What?
You
No.
do?
No.
Of course
No.
you do. You fat bitch.
Hey,
Why can't you let anyone have anything?
it's not
Nobody
like that.
makes comments on how you enjoy stuffing your boobs with peanut butter and Coke Zero. You make me sick.
That was
In
uncalled
fact,
for.
I'm calling the police right now to
Whoa,
take
no, no,
you
no, no,
away
no.
for being
No,
an oxygen
dude,
thief.
Dude.
Kiss my ass.
So, anyway, why do people not like the M1 Carbine? Is it the power? Is it the reliability? Or is it the aesthetics? Today I'm going to talk to you about why most of our grandpas think the M1 Carbine is a steaming hot pile of goblin shit. But first, I think it's important to divulge the wholesome history of this little pea shooter. So, let's begin, shall we? The M1 Carbine has beautiful and humble beginnings. It's about perseverance, genius, the American dream, and murdering a police officer at your moonshine distillery. I am not making that up. David Marshall Williams was arrested for getting in a shootout with the cops at his moonshine distillery, and a cop died. Look, it's even on his ever so reliable Wikipedia page. Oh, but don't worry, it's all good for him. He got out because he spent a lot of his time in prison drawing up schematics and plans for a short-stroke gas piston system. And that's pretty impressive. He did that in his spare time while serving his sentence. And to make a long story short, Winchester was commissioning rifles for a light carbine trial prior to World War II, and it just so happened that they were horny for Dave Williams' short-stroke gas piston system. So, Dave Williams, or Carbine Williams, we will later refer to him as, his service to the country was much more important than serving out the rest of his sentence, so they just let him go. And he would spend the rest of his days doing gunsmith work in his own time and lived till 1975. Times were so simple. I wish we can go back. So yeah, the short-stroke gas piston system that Williams developed was a huge success in the Second World War. The rifle that Winchester ended up producing with his mechanism, the M1 Carbine, was a great force multiplier for rear echelon forces. That's because before the carbine's introduction, there really was a lack of valid options for people who didn't need a full-size rifle. So if you were a medic, a radio man, a paratrooper, or in a vehicle crew, for example, you would be expected to lug around this 9.5-pound M1 rifle, which is great in its own right, and don't get me wrong, it kind of slaps the tits off anything else that was around at the time, but it was just simply too large and unwieldy for somebody who wasn't in a combat role. Almost forgot. And there was also the 1911 A1 service pistol, which only held 7 rounds of boomer bullets, and also isn't very effective beyond a stone's throw for anybody who isn't very well trained with it. And really the only other alternative at the time was the Thompson submachine gun, which was even heavier than the M1 rifle, and in its own right was even more of an expert's weapon if you wanted to engage anybody beyond close range. So enter the M1 Carbine. We're back here now. It's a light, compact, semi-automatic rifle, and it was a gift from the hillbilly mountain gods of North Carolina. May our mountains be dewy and our teeth be rotten. It weighs in at only 5 pounds, which is roughly half the weight of an M1 rifle. It uses 15-round detachable magazines, which are full of brass case controversy, and it is incredibly easy to shoot. This little guy would end up becoming the most massively produced small arm in the US military during World War II, with over 6 million rifles manufactured in that time period alone. And it was even so popular with specialty roles that many variants of it were manufactured during its service life. There's the M1A1 carbine, a folding variant that allowed airborne units to jump from planes with their trusty Rudy-Tooty point-and-shooty tucked safely in their prison wallets. The M2 carbine, which is just an M1 carbine with a 30-round magazine and the ability to switch firing modes from semi-auto to full-on wango-bango mag dump. And the M3 carbine, which was equipped with a massive night vision optic system that also doubled as a DirecTV satellite dish. And that's it! Nobody ever made any other variants. Ever. Moving on. So later on, after winning a powerhouse round of slap-ass with the Axis forces, the M1 Carbine had fulfilled its purpose, and it did a great job. But it would only be a few short years before the United States became involved with the Korean War, and the M1 Carbine would be put into service once more. For those of you that are kind of new to this stuff, the US military understandably likes to keep their equipment as long as they can, and kind of upcycle it into roles that it wasn't initially intended for. They've done this with the 1918 A2 BAR, the M14, the M1 Garand, and that's how I've always pronounced it. I don't care. And unfortunately, the M1 Carbine. Although the .30 carbine cartridge is more than adequate, having similar muzzle energy to a .357 Magnum out of the same barrel length, there are obvious shortcomings, and for the most part, I think they were largely ignored. The M1 Carbine's reputation started taking a turn. It started being referred to as a total slouch, and didn't even carry enough energy to puncture your hot dad's denim jacket, or even hurt your feelings for that matter. And talk also began to spread about the M1 Carbine's reliability, with mentions of the weapon jamming more than a 1911 from the perspective of a Glock owner. But if we look into the use of the carbine in this era, we can kind of see where these rumors started to come from. The M1 Carbine was intended to be a personal defense weapon, with an estimated effective range of about 200 to 300 yards depending on your individual skill level. But during this time period, it was being pushed into more forward operating and offensive roles where an M1 Garand would have been much more preferable. So it may not come to a surprise when you are lobbing a 110 grain Hail Mary at 500 or 600 yards with iron sights at a guy you can hardly see and not scoring lethal hits. Which I think is also the beginning of the rumor of how the M1 Carbine was designed to wound and not kill. I guess the idea is if you shoot an enemy soldier and you don't kill him, his buddies are going to stop fighting to help him instead of fighting back with you. But if you just killed the soldier, apparently they're just going to leave him behind and not care for him and continue the fight. But instead of acknowledging that the carbines were kind of being pushed above their weight class, rumors would just continue to circulate about how they were incapable of puncturing winter coats, or enemy soldiers were hopped up on amphetamines and just eating drugs and catching slugs, man. I don't know if that one's actually true. I didn't look that up. You know, my grandpa told me that one, actually. I'm part of the problem. And for the most part, the reliability issues can likely be chalked up to these magazines. If I was going to fault the M1 Carbine for anything, it would be the design of the magazines they come with. Really, the soldier was intended to use them to their heart's content, and when they wore out, you would simply discard them or trade them for new ones. But that's a rule everybody clearly didn't follow to a T, and then you are going into battle with old poopy magazines.
In conclusion, it's simply misunderstood, and remembered only for what it did wrong in an environment it shouldn't have been expected to perform in. If you have an M1 Carbine, cherish it. Take it out to the range and share it with someone before the rumors get to them first. Hell, take it hunting and shoot a deer, and wound it, so 5 more deer come to its aid, and then repeat until there's no more deer. Just prove the naysayers wrong. Thanks for watching.